On the positive side, I think it's pretty cool that Formula One, this sport that I've been into for decades, is finally gaining ground in the public eye. People are, learning about what it is, and they're getting into it and going to the races more. But of course, that has its obvious negative impacts not only on ticket prices because the sport is becoming more commercialized, on consumerism in that same regard, but also I have noticed that it has affected the racing itself and had a negative impact on the quality of the pureness of the racing. And so for any true motorsport enthusiast who's been into it forever, I've noticed a move away from the sport. I did not personally resubscribe to F1 TV this year. I let it expire on its own, and starting to focus a lot more on motorcycle racing, actually. Of course, this has kind of been building up for years, but I think it really kicked in, really started. I mean, the hyper commercialization of F1 with the season finale, the last few laps of the 2021 World Championship in Abu Dhabi, when there was an extremely unlikely and unprofessional call from race control to create basically as much TV drama at the end of the race as possible, when really it was not in accordance with the rules in how a race should be run, how an incident should be handled. And, everybody has their own thoughts on that, but I myself have been a professional race controller for motorsports at a major motorsport facility in the United States for the better part of 10 years. I haven't done it so much in the last few years, but I know how these things work. I've worked major events before, including but not limited to F1 and MotoGP as a track marshal, but have been a pro motorsport race controller for many, American national series, included AMA Superbikes, and IndyCar. So everybody has their own, thing they might want to say about that incident. But I can tell you that it was made for TV with absolute certainty. It was completely unprofessional. And since then, I've seen just a decline in overall quality in the pureness of the racing. So I lately have been trying to get more people who are actually interested in the racing part of F1 into more pure forms of motorsport, including motorcycle racing. And so it's funny that as soon as I started doing that, MotoGP, which is the F1 of motorcycle racing, got bought out by Liberty Media earlier this year, which also owns Formula One. So I might expect that to become a little more commercialized, but at the very least with two-wheel racing, there are safeguards against some of the potential risks of, further declining of quality that we see in car racing. For example, an extreme case would be, are self-driving motorcycles possible? I think the answer is no, not to the extent that self-driving cars are foreseeably possible, and to the extent that there are actually already many aspects to an F1 car that are not controlled by the driver. I don't think the same could be true of motorcycle racing when you see how especially the pros are moving around the bikes and manipulating, the weight transfer into corners in order to get through the turn as quickly as possible. That's just not something that a computer can do. I don't see that being possible. So at least there is that safeguard. There's a level of realness that's never going away. to motorcycle racing. But even look, I've driven lots of cars on a racetrack. At the track I used to work at, there was an extreme experience branch that had a home base there at the track, and I drove all of their supercars, and some were more pure than others. For example, the Ferraris generally have driver aids like traction control and stability control and things that actually help you have more fun on track, but they don't interfere with the process of you actually feeling like you have control over the car. Whereas a Nissan GTR, it has thousands of computer sensors on it and is basically run by computers. Like, it even has a GPS system that knows when you're on a racetrack, and it does everything in its power to prevent you from going off of the racetrack. So there's almost no responsibility on your part to get all the details of turning in to every corner and apexing it and turning out of every corner and getting back on the throttle, to keeping it on track for yourself. The computer's basically driving the car to much more of an extent than the Ferrari that I mentioned. So anyway, I just overall, my point is that I see F1 moving into this more automated, like potentially AI controlled, hyper commercialized, less and less pure and more superficial form of entertainment, rather than it being the true sport that it used to be. As far back as, let's say, the early 2010s, the racing was still exciting, but naturally aspirated engines, they made a hell of a noise. There was good wheel-to-wheel racing, little to no driver aids. The drivers had to do work. Weirdly enough, I noticed that as soon as Kimi Räikkönen started kind of falling back in the grid and getting older, that's when all the cars became more overloaded with all the aids that actually kind of took the driver talent out of the equation as far as how the results were going to pan out. So anyway, lately I've been, really trying to get more and more people into motorcycle racing because it's more pure by its very nature. I myself have been riding more motorcycles lately. I currently have two, and it's been a really fun time, and I haven't missed F1 at all. But when you compare F1, not just the realness or lack thereof to it, but also how exciting it is to an equivalent form of motorcycle racing, i.e. MotoGP, man, it just doesn't compare. So I highly recommend that if you are one of these new F1 fans, that you look around at other forms of motorsport that do still remain pure, especially motorcycle racing. But there's also like British touring car and, American like IMSA sports car series. And, there are lots of cool things out there. And if this is your first taste of motorsport in general, there is so much more to discover out there. And F1 is actually, very quickly coming to the forefront as, an example of how everything else can get and does eventually get commodified and commercialized to appeal to the sensibilities of the masses, which in essence are materialist, we could say philosophically materialist in nature, which means it's all about appealing to the senses and not to the essence of the thing. Okay, it's a crucial distinction in philosophy, is appearance, which deals with the material aspects, versus essence, which deals with the reality of it. And the reality of F1, it's not looking very good. Anyway, definitely check out, if you want to check out motorcycle racing in particular, check out the Isle of Man TT, which, if you're watching this around the time of posting, is going on right now. It is the most insane motorcycle race on public roads, through towns and villages and mountain roads, all over the Isle of Man, almost 38-mile course that's done in 17 minutes. So these guys are averaging over 130 miles an hour per lap on this course, and it's just a phenomenal motorsport event, probably the greatest in the world. And you know, if you're a professional rider, like in MotoGP or World Superbike or something like that, you're not allowed to participate in these events if you have a contract with one of those big, you know, manufacturer teams, because it's so dangerous, you know. But it's super badass. If you want to know what the epitome of motorsport looks like, check out the Isle of Man TT. It's a brilliant fortnight of racing. So anyway, that's my video semi-rant about where F1 is and how it's going, and where you should take your attention from here if you're a new F1 fan, because there's plenty more to discover out there. Cheers.